We also spoke with defense attorneys, Bahraini journalists, and human rights activists. We met with officials from the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Interior. And our main findings are these, two, really. Since the end of 2007, security officials regularly resort to torture to secure confessions from security suspects. And secondly, that there's been a complete failure of the use by security officials to inflict pain in order to elicit confessions. We're talking about electroshock devices, suspension in painful positions for prolonged periods, beatings, prolonged standing, and in some cases, threats of sexual violence. I want to put the emphasis today, though, on the accountability issue. The failure to investigate is equivalent to impunity. Officials told us when we met with them in June 2009 and on subsequent visits, there may be occasional, isolated instances of abuse, and we deal with them. But the practice, they don't deal with it. And when you don't deal with these issues that we interviewed, or the hundreds of detainees who have been arrested in these incidents, were responsible or not for criminal activity, for destruction of property, for instance, for endangering others' lives. The issue is not whether they were wrongfully or properly arrested, although it appears that at least some were wrongfully arrested. The issue is that torture is prohibited, flat out. Torture confessions are usually pretty worthless anyway, but again, that's not the issue. It's a crime to torture anyone, whether they're guilty of other offenses or not. Therefore, let me finish my presentation with a recommendation that the U.S. Congress collectively and congresspersons individually urge Bahrain in private meetings and in public statements to investigate promptly all allegations of torture and ill treatment by security officials, no matter what rank, to prosecute those found responsible in court meeting international fair trial standards, and if found responsible, to discipline and punish them as appropriate to the seriousness of the crime. I want to close on, go back, they could obviously see signs of abuse. Moreover, government doctors were now able to provide, in available reports, corroboration of torture and ill treatment on the basis of injuries they observed. So this marks, I think, an important major improvement from the era of prior to 1999, when routine torture characterized Bahrain. In those years,
attention on these issues in the GCC countries and in Bahrain in particular are needed and overdue, and we love this opportunity to discuss these issues. I'm going to focus more on the political rights of Bahrainis, Bahraini citizens, including freedom of association, freedom of expression, and a little bit of discussion of upcoming elections. Scheduled to take place, parliamentary elections scheduled for the end of this year. I can echo what was said, that in general, Bahrain is a freer place in terms of political rights and human rights than it was 10 years ago. It was in the first several years after King Hamad acceded to the throne in 1999. It was a model for political liberalization. Tremendous progress was made during those years. Unfortunately, in the past 5 to 6 years, as you mentioned in your opening statement, we've seen regression in a number of areas. I'll address a few of those specific areas. In terms of freedom of expression, there have always been constraints on freedom of expression. After 2001, there was improvement in this regard. There were a number of independent newspapers founded. In the last couple of years, there have been some alarming increases in constraints on free expression. There was a existing press law in Bahrain is government-owned and relatively strictly controlled. While the print media is more privately owned and independent, there are still boundaries that are often not exceeded. The government over the last several years has gradually shifted more away from an approach of direct censorship of publications and forbidding unwanted criticism to be published, and more toward selective targeting and intimidation and encouraging of self-censorship among the media. Just in last year, there were some, the government focused its efforts on freedom of expression, like a lot of the regimes, on new media and the internet. In January 2009, there was an order issued by the Ministry of Culture and Information which requires all internet service providers in Bahrain to block websites on a list issued by the government. There were as well as public discussion forums and some websites that track human rights both in Bahrain and elsewhere in the region. This crackdown on online content and new media is particularly resonant and important in Bahrain because Bahrain is one of the most internet-connected societies in the Middle East, in the Arab world, with more than a third of its citizens being online regularly. In addition, the government has followed the examples from the other Arab authoritarian regimes in the region in taking steps that it touts as political reforms and democratic reforms that in fact are intended to consolidate the government's control of the political sphere. One example of this was the establishment of the Bahrain Institute for Political Development. It was established by a decree issued by the king in June 2005 and was supported by the international community and the UNDP at that time. In theory, this was established to advance democratic reforms in the kingdom. In practice, many of the activists and former political reformers view the BIPD, the Bahrain Institute for Political Development, as an institution that's been established to consolidate the government's control. Any organization or association wishing to undertake any activities seen as political activities by the government is required to coordinate their activities through this BIPD, which coordinates closely with the government ministries. The political parties officially remain banned in Bahrain, but the political associations and organizations that exist, or those that undertake political activities, including monitoring human rights, are required to work closely with the BIPD, which is perceived by the Independent Act. The new associations law had additional restrictions on political associations and their regulation, while the monarchy touted this political associations law as being in support of political reform and supporting greater openness. It was perceived by the political associations in Bahrain as having a reverse effect. It was strongly opposed by the human rights community in Bahrain. The political associations law included provisions prohibiting political associations in Bahrain from receiving funding or any financial assistance from any foreign entities in Bahrain. Just earlier this month, regional director for the Gulf for the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs, NDI, was denied entry to Bahrain upon arrival at the airport in Manama. The stated reason given for her being denied entry was the government that she was scheduled to meet with individuals representing the Bahrain Human Rights Society and the Bahrain Transparency Society regarding possible monitoring of elections later this year. So this is an alarming trend that Bahrain's official take on political association or freedom of association among the most strict in the region and in the world. It's quite unusual for governments to officially deny entry to foreign citizens, foreign organizations, simply on the grounds of them having private meetings with members of political associations in the country. I think there's been steady progress. There's been a number of successful projects to improve corporate governance, and the issues of governance and corruption are the main area in which, during this period of the last 5 years, which most other areas of governance and democracy have seen progression, have seen steady progress. It seems that the Bahraini government does recognize the importance of improving the business climate and to encourage foreign investment. Most recently, last month in March, the Minister of State, Mansour bin Rajab, was arrested and dismissed from his post on corruption charges, money laundering charges, which is the first time since Bahrain's independence in 1971 that a government minister has been either dismissed from his post or charged on issues of corruption. So this is seen as a positive step. Those of us who are supporters of democracy and human rights would like to see the government's commitment to reform in the economic and business sectors and fighting corruption, accompanied by a return to the progress of political liberalization that we saw between 2000 and 2003. Thank you.